Hello and welcome. Tonight we're going to be having a conversation about fallacies and folks that use them in fallacious ways. We're going to be discussing what a fallacy actually is, the way people behave with their fallacies, the way people might present them as if they're some sort of win, and we'll also be discussing a few of our favorite fallacies as well. And obviously we're going to be having a bit of an enjoyment, a bit of a laugh along the way. And hopefully you can suggest whatever you like in the chat as well, and it can be brought up on stream. But for now, here's the intro. So, hello and welcome to this sci-fi show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And if you're here tonight and you've not met us before, we're Answers in Reason, and we do a lot of these streams and videos about various philosophical and theological and scientific topics. And
we talk a lot of bollocks, in other words.
And who doesn't enjoy a load of bollocks? And tonight we're talking about fallacies in general. Though not just the fallacies, the behaviours that go along with fallacies and people's tendency to call fallacy and things like that, aren't we, Dave?
We are, yeah. Like we often talk about something called fallacy bingo, which we generally tend to see a lot of atheists do and skeptics do. So we'll talk about stuff like that, as well as, common fallacies that we see, people getting stuff wrong, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point. There's a lot of people who name these fallacies but actually get them wrong, and they might be just saying something completely different. And if you get them to answer what that fallacy actually means, they can't even provide a description. It's just sort of they've heard other people say it in similar situations.
I've actually had someone call me out on a fallacy, get it completely wrong. And when I said, "What do you think the fallacy is?" they said, "That's the shifting a burden of proof fallacy." Because it's up to me to prove they didn't get it right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's another thing that we're going to be discussing as well. When you're in a conversation, the lack of willingness sometimes that some people demonstrate to actually have the conversation, instead going for, as you say, Dave, someone saying something like fallacy bingo, or you're shifting the burden of proof, or I don't have to tell you anything. So I suppose we should start with the very basics of what a fallacy actually is and what it means. So I think it'd be fair to say that, a fallacy is an argument that contains a sort of error in reasoning. It doesn't necessarily mean that the conclusion is wrong, though. And that's something that's often quite missed out on, isn't it, Dave?
It is, yeah. Like a lot of skeptics and atheists will throw out a fallacy and think that disproves the argument. I've spotted this fallacy, therefore your argument is clearly wrong. But that's not what a fallacy is. If you've committed a fallacy in your argument, you've made an error in your reasoning, and all it means is that the argument doesn't necessarily justify the conclusion. It might not have good reason to go from your argument to the conclusion, but the conclusion could be absolutely spot on.
I mean, one way you could speak about it is talking about how a syllogism, it could be an invalidly structured syllogism, but the conclusion of it could actually still be true. It's just actually there's something wrong with the way your premises flow. They don't follow onto each other, so they don't entail the conclusion. Therefore, they're not valid.
Yeah, I mean, even a straw man even you committing a straw man fallacy, the conclusion could still be right. It's just you've attacked a weaker version of the argument and therefore maybe not disputed the argument, but got to the right conclusion.
And that's something I wanted to come on to actually, because fallacies are generally split into two main like trees of formal and informal. And what's the key difference there, Dave?
Okay, so a formal fallacy is a fallacy where there's an error in the actual structure of the argument. Um, so if you take something like modus ponens or modus tollens, if you have if P then Q, P therefore Q, but you might have gone for if P then Q, Q therefore P,
Mm.
that would be affirming the consequent. And that is an error in the actual structure of the argument because the consequent doesn't guarantee the antecedent, it's the antecedent that guarantees the consequent.
So that's sort of what we were talking about with the syllogism before. If it could have an invalid structure, and therefore you end up with the correct conclusion, but it's not well reasoned. So therefore, that is why it's a form of logic, which is why it is regarded as a formal fallacy. So on the other side, you've got the informal fallacies. So how do they work, Dave?
The informal fallacies are ones where it's not an actual error in the structure of the argument, it's just an error in the way you've reasoned. Um, so a straw man, let's go with that one because it's nice and easy. A straw man argument is one where you've not steel man the person's argument, you've gone for a weaker version of the argument and attacked that. So it's not that there's an actual fault in the structure of what you did. You could still be doing if P then Q, Q P therefore Q, but your P is a much weaker version of what has been said. So therefore your Q, it could still be correct, but it's most likely not because it's a weaker version of what's actually being said.
And that makes a lot of sense. And unfortunately, the straw man is one that gets thrown around a hell of a lot. I've had it thrown at me for asking a clarifying question because I didn't understand exactly what they were saying. They were being unclear with their premise. And I said, "Is this what you're saying? What do you mean by that?" If you try and get people to explain things a little bit further, it seems odd that that sometimes results in people saying that that's a straw man. It's like, no, I've had people come along and respond to a post straight away saying that's a straw man. Um, like certain posts where I've been talking about how that there's different definitions of atheism, and my preference happens to be this one, and that's a straw man of what atheists believe. Right. What? I'm not I'm
Yeah.
not having an argument. I mean, that's sort of something that comes along with these fallacies. You're in a conversation or argument or debate or something like that, and it's the way you respond to them, at least in general, and that's the way they should be used. Um, Rather than just being, I don't agree with that. And that's another way I see straw man used is I don't agree with it, therefore it's a straw man.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. And like you said, with the atheism thing and the other definition, I've had an atheist say, well, the other definition straw man's what other atheists believe. But a definition can't straw man somebody because, like you said, a fallacy is an error in reasoning and it's an error in an argument. So if there's no argument being made, there might be an implicit argument being made, and therefore there's a fallacy that could be pulled out of it. But a definition isn't making an argument, it's describing something.
And that's all definitions really are. They're describing how the language is used. And if there's multiple definitions of something, these are the 5 different ways that this particular word is being used. That's not a fallacy there. That's just information at the end of the
Yeah, it's
day.
like saying your shopping list is a straw man
Yeah.
because it described the items that you bought, and you might have wanted Cathedral City instead of Co-op and brand cheese, so therefore the thing straw man. It's yeah.
Yeah. So that is a very common one that I see and one that I tend to get frustrated with. It's to the point now when someone actually mentions the whole Strawman thing, I go, bet it isn't. Anytime I see Strawman, I go, I'm sure it's not. I haven't even looked at it. And yeah, 8 or 9 times out of 10, it's not a Strawman. It is just someone saying like, I don't agree with this.
or asking a clarifying question, or saying, well, you might be using it this way, but another person is using it another way. Yeah, the straw man is often very much misunderstood. A couple of others that I see atheists misunderstand a lot are the ad hom.
Yeah, getting confused between
Yeah,
insult and an actual ad hom.
yeah, and a popular one that's come about in the last couple of years, and I'm not sure how, but the argument from authority. They think that citing some paper somewhere is making an argument from authority, or saying something like, doctors think smoking contributes to cancer. They'll say argument from authority. And it's like, well, that's no. You citing Dawkins on transgender stuff is an argument from authority. But, no.
I think that's one of the things that gets misunderstood. There are valid uses of authorities. You know, otherwise, anytime you go to your doctor and you accept their diagnosis, that would be an argument from authority. It's an error in your reasoning. Well, actually, there could be a lot of good reasoning to accept what your doctor has said. Maybe you've been going to them for years. You appreciate they've done like 6, 7 years of medical school and they've been working in this GP practice for however long. There's plenty of good reasons to trust what your doctor says. And yeah, sure, if they say something that doesn't sound right, feel free to suspend judgment a little bit on it. Don't take the medicine at the same time. You're if you actually don't trust them, and go get a medical degree yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that something that's definitely missed is the fact that there are experts, and an argument from authority is supposed to be an error in the authority you cite. And as Dave mentioned, Dawkins about trans rights or about plumbing, anything that's not related to the field that they specialize in, or if they're a single authority saying something against the field that they're in without anything to really back it up. Generally you get a consensus in the fields. Well, for 80% of people, this is the best treatment, so that's what we're going to do. That's why we use this treatment. If someone comes along and goes, "Oh no, what you need is some ashwagandha and some little beans, and you need to put them in a NutriBullet and lie with your bum in the air and say hello to the sun 3 times a day," then okay, that might be a situation where you should go, "Well, hold on a minute." I need a second opinion from a doctor that doesn't seem like a total loon. But in general, your doctor is going to be someone that is a little bit more sensible than that.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of them forget is that argument from authority is a very specific kind of argument. It's not just saying experts in this field think X, so the probability of X being true is quite high, or seems to be quite high, or we should go with that consensus. It's this expert says this, or well, this person says this. I consider him an expert, so therefore what he said is true.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. I mean, just to throw out a nice controversial one here, citing Aaron Raw as an authority on atheism and the
Uh,
definition of atheism.
or geology.
Yeah. But often they'll say, Aaron Ross says this, so therefore that must be true. That is an argument from authority because, yes, I know that Aaron Raw has been an atheist activist for a very long time. But his credentials for actually talking about atheism in the philosophical sense are pretty much minimal. And it's clear he has an agenda.
Hmm.
And he's not an actual qualified expert in the topic. And just because he says something, it doesn't make it true. So that would be an argument from authority fallacy, but none of them seem to see that.
No, and I think that's the other side of it as well. It's only an argument from authority fallacy when it's an opinion that disagrees with theirs.
Yeah.
It's a good authority if it's my opinion. And it's a bad authority if it's not. And again, I mean, that's, operating on confirmation bias. And
Yeah.
again, that shows an error in reasoning, which is why, there you go. Just like to give a quick shout out to everybody who I've seen pop up in the chat. I didn't have it on the front screen. I thought no one was here, and there's a bunch of you in there. So hello everybody. I hope you're doing well. Um, I Lone Wolf, yes, I agree with you, is an authority on strawman arguments. Um, Great to see you all, though. Hey, Claire, how you doing? Per, great to have you. Kimo, great to see you as well. Icarus, every time you retract a message, I really want to know what it is, because, I reckon it's probably something really, really naughty.
He said Aaron Raw is an expert on atheism, and how dare we question it?
Yeah, he did deserve a slap for that. And Command Cyborg, how you doing? Lone Wolf and Twisted. And Bible, yes, how you doing? Great to have you all here. Let me know if there are any questions or anything you want clarified as we're going through, and hopefully you'll enjoy your time here. So that's obviously addressing like the argument from authority and a couple of the other big ones that we see pop up as, I don't know how else you describe it, but sort of as quick wins in a way. It's, I don't really want to engage properly. At least this is how it seems to me. I don't really want to engage in this conversation. It's got a different opinion for me. I want to find some way to dismiss it, whilst claiming a victory. Is that sort of your experience as well, Dave?
Yeah, I think that's quite spot on. That's what it is. They're looking for, like, if you think about some of the other behaviors, oh, you're a philosophy major. Therefore, that's a dismissive thing. Oh, you're doing a philosophy. They're looking for reasons to dismiss what you're saying so they don't have to actually be challenged by it. And I think in a lot of cases, like you say, the spewing out of fallacies is the same thing. It's, you've committed such and such a fallacy, therefore your argument must be wrong, therefore I have no reason to listen to you.
I actually got someone say that the whole philosophy major thing to me the other day, actually, and it
Yeah,
was.
that's what made me
Oh,
think of it.
really? Yeah, I was just like, no, I mean, thank you. I know he meant it as a dismissive insult, but thank you. I don't think I have anywhere near the level of knowledge to be considered a philosophy major, but the fact that showing you some basic logic, because that's all it was. It was like a really basic overview of how propositional logic works with your epistemic attitudes and some other answers that are not exactly full answers to a proposition. And that's all it was. And that was the response. And there were lots of comments on there. Well, you don't know what logic is. I don't get your logic. Logic is subjective, and all that sort of stuff was coming out from it as well.
Yeah.
And it was just like,
Um, I know logic, I just don't know your kind of logic.
yeah,
But your kind of logic was just standard classical logic. That's what you were using. That's, you
it,
do a degree, you do a course, that's what you're going to be learning.
yeah. I mean, it was the very basics of basic logic. Like, I don't have advanced knowledge in this subject. I don't. I don't have the time to. I sometimes look at people's arguments that are all symbolized, if you will, and I sit there and I have to translate every single piece of it. And still, sometimes I go, okay, I've got lost on the second line.
I do, because I don't generally work like that. I usually use full language. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think words are generally a better way to do it. It's just sometimes it's good to have a representation of some simple things. I think some labels work really well just to describe something in different ways. And what I always try and do, at least these days, is actually say both things at the same time, so that if they happen to come across someone who's using it in different ways, they can go, "Ah, that's what that meant. I know what that means now." Um, I wish someone had done that to me when I first started looking at symbolic logic. It was like, what? What? um. Oh yeah, twisted. Yeah, philosophical word salad. Yeah, you often get that a lot. Anyone saying something to those effects. Um. Twisted also says science people who hate philosophy always get the argument from authority fallacy wrong. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily just science people. I think it's just people online in general. Oh yeah, this morning I saw someone say something to the effect of "You're using science. That's a special bleeding fallacy." What the hell? I mean, that's ridiculous because I mean, there's so much wrong with that. But we do hear something similar from our side, if you will, in this debate. I assume that that was someone who was on the more creationist side or something. But on our side, we hear people say like the kalam is special pleading, and it's a logically valid argument. And actually, if you fill in some of the blanks that are in the argument, you can make it sound sound from a naturalistic perspective. So actually, but rather than think about it, again, this is the problem that we're talking about. Rather than think about the argument and how it could relate to things, it suddenly comes down on, oh, well, theists use that argument, therefore it must be wrong, and theism is special pleading. It's like- and yeah, and it's a shame because sometimes there are people who are, generally getting these fallacies way off the mark, and getting them bang on as well in conversations. And sometimes it's hit or miss. But the other side of it is it really worth just shouting fallacies into the wind?
No, it's not. Um, I mean, it kind of shows you something. The idea of fallacies and the fact that we've got labels for a lot of them, because fallacies are common errors in reasoning. So if they're common enough that we have labels for them, it shows how many people make those mistakes and how often they're made. And shouting out a fallacy is fine. Um, but that assumes that the other person knows what they're talking about when it comes to those fallacies. Just shouting out a fallacy does no good if the other person doesn't know it, or if the person shouting out the fallacy doesn't actually know it properly, because it doesn't explain the error in reasoning.
No.
And
And then
yeah,
sometimes you might not agree with the fallacy either. And it's as well,
yeah, that happens a lot.
yeah. Well, how did I commit that fallacy?
Yeah.
And then you get ones like you mentioned earlier, oh, you're shifting the burden of proof. No, I'm just asking you to explain the fallacy and how I committed that with what I said.
Or you get people who say, well, people who understand this fallacy would know where the error in reasoning is
Yeah.
and never actually give it. And it's because they don't actually know and they don't want to have to put forward their opinion, because once you put forward your opinion, you might be corrected. And that seems to be a big problem in the skeptic community. Nobody actually wants to make an argument in case they're wrong. The longer they can hold out having to make an argument, the more they can hold on to the idea that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. It's the desperate attempt to be right before being correct, basically, isn't it? Like, as in winning rather than actually coming correct.
Yeah.
People are more inclined to say, well, yeah, I've won this argument, than actually go, oh, hang on, maybe I got that wrong. Take a step back. Oh, okay, it was an error
Yeah.
in my reasoning. But actually, hang on a second, I still don't agree with your conclusion because what about this? And look, all of a sudden you're having a conversation. And as you were saying, Dave, I mean, some folks don't understand the fallacies or have a very vague understanding of fallacies. So shouting out fallacy to them, it doesn't help them understand what they've done wrong. But it is compounded by the problem that the people who are shouting out fallacy often don't know the fallacies either. And I think that can be a very problematic thing. And realistically, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, Dave, as well, when you're having an argument, as in presenting an argument, a logical argument, you'll tend to use words because it's clearer rather than using the symbols. And I think that again is something that is effective in a conversation. Instead of just listing the fallacies, explain it a little bit. And instead of just going, just go look it up and you can see how it's done or whatever, you can actually address it. And that's the other thing out there. Some of the sites that list fallacies have the fallacies wrong as well.
Yeah, I was going to mention something like that. I was having a discussion yesterday with somebody who said that asking somebody to prove something does not exist commits a fallacy. And I said, which fallacy does it commit? And he said, the proving non existence fallacy. So I said, I've never heard of that fallacy. And he linked me to a site, logically fallacious or some weird name. And it actually had this fallacy listed out, the proving non existence fallacy. And I said, no, that's not an actual fallacy. That's been made up by this person. In philosophy and in logic, you can actually prove non existence. It's the same as proving a negative. Not all non existences can be proved, but not being able to prove all of them doesn't mean you can't prove none of them.
Mm.
And then he linked me to another site and said, well, this proves that it exists. And it was a religious site. It was an actual apologetic site that said proving non-existence is a fallacy. It's like, well, there might be a reason they want to argue that proving non-existence is fallacious because, they don't want you going around proving the non-existence of God.
I mean, that is something that we've come across, actually. A lot of theistic arguments seem to be championed by online atheists these days, as if they're, aha, look at my amazing reasoning. Ah, you can't prove a negative. Ah, ha, ha, ha. But you can.
Yeah. And I especially like the ones who will say something like, maybe you should take a beginner's logic course because then you would know that you can't prove a negative. It's like, well, I've done a little more than a beginner's logic course. And I can tell you that's not in there.
Yeah. It's frustrating at the least. Is philosophical word salad metaphysical? I don't know, but can you eat it? That's the important thing.
Metamusical.
So yeah, I mean, then there's all this information out there, and I think it's one of the problems that we actually have with the internet as well. And I say this as a content creator myself, but anyone can put anything out there, and if it's not actually got any good resources or anything like that tied into it, then there's a good chance that there could be something wrong with it. If you can't check the references, then how do you know that these fallacies are there? Now, don't get me wrong, Dave and I, we made up a few fallacies at one point in the past. We were just having fun with the situation, but we clearly stated that these are not real fallacies in any way, shape, or form. We've made them up just to deal with a couple of frustrations that we've had recently, and that was as far as it went. But there are sites out there that have them listed. They have fallacies that are not actually recognized fallacies. They have errors in their fallacies, and some of the fallacies that are well recognized are being described incorrectly as well. And that, I think, is something that people really don't really get the gist of a lot of the time. It's like, actually.
Well, I mean, that going back to the argument from authority one, there is sites that kind of, like you say, that they don't get it quite right because you can go to some sites and they'll say an argument from authority is when you use an authority to address an argument. It's like, well, no, that's not quite what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, far from it.
Yeah, or a straw man. I've also seen on another site, a straw man is when you misrepresent what somebody is saying.
Yeah,
It
it's in
is,
but
but
that's not the
that's
whole
not
thing.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, because you can misrepresent somebody's argument by accident. That doesn't mean you're straw manning them.
No.
You have to intentionally misrepresent them in a way that creates a weaker form of the argument and then attack that. And then you have a straw man.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. And that again, it's these shortcuts in language that create problems, and it's sort of what we see in the problems with conversations around definitions of atheism. There are people who take a shortcut. Atheism is only a lack of belief in gods. But even in most lack of belief in God definitions, there is more to it than simply lacking belief, because it's usually at least a person. And then you have to go down the question, well, what do you mean by person? Are we talking about someone who has full personhood rights? Or are we just talking about a human? And there's so many additional layers that you can take, even with the most basic definition. Yet you get some people who take this shortcut and go, well, all definitions of atheism, it's not actually all, but let's just say for the argument, all definitions of atheist entail a lack of belief, therefore atheism is only a lack of belief. Well, no. A logical entailment is just saying it's part of a set.
Yeah, and not just that, that would be like a total non sequitur, which
Yeah.
is fallacious reasoning, because just because, all things share X doesn't mean all things are X.
Yes, exactly. Everything that shares oxygen is a human.
Yeah,
What?
it's just not the way properties work,
No, it's not. But then, I mean, you find people who even have trouble with the idea of sets as well. That's why I've been doing a few of those like really short shorts as quick as I can. Just look, just this little bit of information, just this little bit. Just take this away today. Think about it. But yeah. So as we were saying, that these are more commonly thrown out as these argument stoppers, and I think something that needs to be questioned at this point in time is why you're actually having this conversation online at all. Because if all you're doing is having conversations with theists just so you can throw in these argument stoppers and other dismissive things, what exactly are you hoping to achieve?
an ego boost.
That's the only thing I can see, which is essentially very close to, if not exactly bullying to a degree, because it ends up going down the whole poo flinging match and getting other cronies in to gang up on this person and chant the fallacies and throw the memes at them. And they've got the support of their cronies, and they're putting this person down. And there are times when you actually see these conversations turn into what would be considered in real life, a situation of bullying. And I think that that's again not right. And I've had conversations with people on this, and some actually just don't care because they're theists and they're not deserving of any respect or anything like that. And I think that's ridiculous. I may think that theists are incredibly wrong about, well, one topic in particular, but they're still people. They can still be good. They can still be incredibly rational. They can be kind. They can be courteous. You can have great conversations with them. You can discuss things with them at length that perhaps you can learn some things from them about their religion or their take on their religion that you weren't aware of before. But instead, it's this ranting and raving and putting down and shouting fallacy and trying to fill that bingo card and get the win. And I'm just not sure that that's particularly conducive to anything. You know, I don't think that's a good way for us atheists to behave as people that claim to be rational thinkers, that claim to be good people, that claim to be better than theists. I think we can do better, and we should do better, and drop the argument stoppers. There's a lot of dismissive words out there that have come out. I mean, one of the biggest ones on the internet is troll. Troll used to have a very, very specific use. It used to be used for someone that went in to intentionally stir up shit, to wind up either one person or an entire chat and get people really angry and saying all sorts of stuff. That was what they were. Basically, a troll was an internet shit stirrer. But it came to be that, well, I don't agree with you, therefore you're a troll. And that's what it
Or
came to
you're
be.
disagreeing with me, so
Yeah,
therefore you're a troll.
yeah. It's like, and it even happens on the things where people, like might ask your opinion and you give it to them, but they don't like your opinion, and then they say you're trolling, and you're like, not trolling. I answered your question honestly. Did you want me to lie? And there are other ones that have come out, OK Boomer was one that, again, had very valid use, but got overused and diminished. Mansplaining, genuine, real thing that we men do, but again, it's been overused and it's just become a man explaining something rather than actually what it is.
Yeah, or a man saying, "I don't think you're quite right here. You're
Yeah.
mansplaining." Like you said before, a lot of it is to do with dismissing the other side so that you can carry on holding whatever belief it is you hold on to. I suppose I could, in some ways, I can see why people might want to do that because for a lot of atheists and skeptics, being logical and being rational and being skeptical and understanding all these topics becomes a big part of who they are. So if somebody comes in and starts questioning that, then they end up questioning themselves, and that causes a whole feedback loop. And they have to then start to doubt their behavior. And a lot of people just really don't like that sort of self assessment.
Yes. Yeah. It's one of the things that we've actually come back to about skepticism in general. A lot of people don't really understand skepticism past doubt, and they only have that doubt outwards with things that they don't already agree with. They never turn it inwards.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Or they never doubt anybody who seems to be like them or anybody who might agree with them. It's
Yeah.
they just want self-reinforcement, whereas that's not what skepticism is about. It's supposed to be about going after these places where you feel like you're self-reinforcing.
Yeah, I mean, as reason to doubt, I've just said in the chat, self-questioning is a big part of being a skeptic. If you don't like doing that, then don't call yourself a skeptic. And it's
Absolutely.
true, and it's hard to do sometimes, especially when you've held on to a particular position for a really long time. That's the thing. Our attitudes are ingrained within us, and it can be very hard to escape the feeling that you're somehow losing something by going, oh man, this could be wrong. you know. And obviously, you think of yourself as a good skeptic, and you think, oh man, I've got a wrong belief. I can't have a wrong belief. I'm a good skeptic, and that's a problem because actually, skeptics can have wrong beliefs. Skeptic examines their beliefs and changes them so that they tend not to have them. And the thing is, you can make a really good decision based on incomplete information that ends up being wrong. You don't know everything. You can't know everything. I mean, maybe you can if you've had some sort of genetic modification or something like that. But I mean, realistically speaking, here, all the knowledge in all the world, or the entire universe, should I say, you can't have all of that loaded into your brain. I doubt there's enough space in
Have you not seen my marks?
there. That's true. You've been
I
doing
think
very well.
Yeah. No, no, I'm just joking around. I think as well, if you think about it like this as well, you consider some of the average behaviors of many skeptics online where they're just complete pricks. Like, oh my God, haven't you ever studied logic? Don't you know anything? Oh my God, you're such an idiot. You don't know anything. Have you ever thought of trying to be rational? They're like really, really rude and aggressive and arrogant about their behavior. And they'll often rationalize it to themselves. Well, I'm just trying to help them out. I'm trying to make them better. I'm trying to make them think about their beliefs. Now, if somebody comes along and shows you that for all this posturing that you were doing, you actually don't know, then the person would have to admit that rather than actually trying to help them, they were just being an asshole. And, you know, and a lot of people might not like that, so they instead do everything they can to make sure they don't have to face that realization.
Yeah. I suppose that is probably a big part of it. Although I'm not sure that those that tell me that the sort of things where they say I'm just trying to make them better and a better thinker, and I'm not sure that they're actually doing that. I think that's another meme that they've seen, and not
Oh yeah,
necessarily a
yeah.
literal meme, as in the picture form, just as in something that goes around the community. It's another one of those catchphrases, um, because there are quite a few of those, and I think if someone was genuinely trying to help others, then there would be a slightly different format taken.
It would actually be dialogue, yeah.
Yeah,
An attempt to help them rather than an attempt to just dress them down all the time, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so again, this is something I've often spoke about from many different angles. People often say things but don't follow through with the adequate actions. And whether it's, like partners that say they I love you, but they don't actually act with love. They act with own
And shit on your
self-interest.
pillow before you go to
Yeah,
bed.
that sort of thing. Or it's people saying that I'm trying to help you out with your reasoning, but actually all they're doing is just attacking and not actually making sure they have good reasoning themselves. you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, one sec. My apologies. I've had this cold thing for like 4 weeks, and it's still hanging around. Like, but at least I'm not sweating constantly and stuck in bed. So we've obviously discussed a number of things about fallacies. What they are, the difference between a formal and an informal fallacy, the main fallacies that we definitely see being thrown around, sometimes or most often erroneously, but sometimes not. Um, the problems with just actually labeling an argument as fallacious, sort of seeing it as an argument stopper, and also almost seeing this argument stopper as a win, which, as we've already discussed as well, the conclusion could still be true. It's just there's an error in the reasoning getting to the conclusion. And I think from that, you could say that the pursuit at this point, if you realize that there's an error in someone's reasoning, rather than just mentioning the fallacy, it would help asking them questions to get them to actually join the dots down their thought process, and they might actually see some issues here and be able to fill in the gaps. And actually they might turn around and go, oh my god, I completely forgot to say this bit, and all of a sudden that's the gap that's missing the information, and all of a sudden it all flows and it's no longer fallacious. And actually having that conversation might have even helped you go, oh my god, they're actually right about this. So you're both winning there. They've corrected a
Yeah.
fallacious argument, and you've actually seen how their conclusion was correct and how to get there just through having a conversation. So I think that again is a behavior that we need to change in our little community. Are there any others that you can think of that we can throw out there though that are quite common?
You mean with regards to fallacies?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think one real problem in the atheist and skeptic communities when it comes to fallacies is that they read the name of the fallacy, and that's as far as they go, and they deduce everything about it from the name. Sort of like the common problem on YouTube. I've read the title of your video. I now know your entire argument, and I'm going to tell you exactly what's wrong with what you say in your video, even though I haven't watched it. And I think that happens a lot with fallacies with regards to skeptics. There was an argument not long ago where it was somebody arguing that agnosticism breaks the middle ground fallacy.
Oh yes, I was in that
Yeah.
conversation.
Um, because they'd read the title of the fallacy as, the middle ground fallacies, and they interpreted it to mean that there can be no middle grounds. And what he was actually arguing was something akin to the law of excluded middle,
But
but
getting it
getting that
wrong.
completely wrong as well. Yeah. The middle ground fallacy is when you have two extreme positions and you say that the truth must lie in the middle of those two extreme positions. Um, Whereas he took it to mean you can't have a middle ground. You either are this or are that. You're either atheist or theist. There is no middle ground because it's one or the other. Um, and if you had a middle ground, it would be fallacious because you've broken the fallacy of the middle ground.
Yeah. I've seen that one a lot, especially in my recent couple of articles in that that I've posted in the atheist theist forum as well. Um, there's been a lot of that, people not understanding the law of the excluded middle, or naming the middle ground fallacy and just describing it. And it's like, so you go down this whole thing of epistemic attitudes and saying, you realize that a proposition can be true or false, but you can actually not be sure, so you're suspending judgment, and they go down, oh no, that's breaking the law of excluded middle. I'm like, right.
Yeah,
It's not. I'm not saying, there's a third position on this proposition.
yeah,
I'm saying that there's a number of different attitudes that you can take. There's these three main attitudes, and actually there's other attitudes that where you don't believe it true or false, but for different reasons as well. So another one that I've actually thought of as well is special pleading. People actually think that it has something to do with
yeah,
pleading, and
yeah.
I've actually looked into this. Special pleading is actually a misnomer. It wasn't. It was a mistranslation, basically, and it wasn't supposed to be special pleading, but it stuck. Um, but it's essentially talking about. Sorry, my mind's gone blank there.
Special pleading is when you force somebody to a standard which you excuse yourself from without good reason.
Yes, so basically holding someone to different standards, and as you say, with
Without good
good reason.
reason.
There
That's the thing that everybody
there
forgets.
can be some good reason for different standards, obviously. Um, but it's one of the things that we often spoke about with the whole special pleading thing, and how there can be uh, special pleading within various logical entailments. How within the definition of atheism, you would have to allow for a similar sort of behavior within the theists. If you expect a theist to read any papers on a topic, but you're not willing to read anything that they present back, again, you're holding each other to different standards. Why should they have to do the work and not you? And that would be what we're talking about with special pleading there, rather than yeah.
Oh, sorry,
No,
finish
no.
and then all. Perfect example of special pleading is a lot of the atheists argue that words have multiple meanings. You should ask somebody what label they use to describe themselves, and then go with that. But then turn around and say, well, you're either atheist or theist. You don't have a choice about that. So you're an atheist because you lack belief. Atheism only has one definition. So they'll argue for every other word having multiple meanings. Every other Everybody should ask an atheist what definition they use. But then if the definition is different, they will argue that they're using it wrong and there is only one definition and there is no actual good reason to excuse themselves from their own argument.
Yeah, and another way you could even say that is if they spend some time, they look at, say, the etymology, and they extract, direct translation of atheos, rather than taking the time to understand the use, and so they'll just use part of the history. And actually go, well, actually, if you look into it, and here's a few sources, it doesn't mean just that. But of course, the bit that backs them up.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. Special pleading is definitely one that a lot get wrong.
And I think I actually made an error earlier. Actually, the one that isn't named correctly was question begging.
Begging the question. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that one was supposed to that one was a mistranslation. So Yeah, sorry, my brain's a bit shot at the moment. So I apologise for misspeaking there. But I do think it was actually that. So special pleading was probably named.
Off to Gulag with you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I've had the thought pop into my head about that guy that was telling us that we're not atheist because we believe gods don't exist.
You have a belief about God,
Yeah.
therefore you're a theist. Yeah.
Yeah. That one gives me a chuckle most days.
But he also argued that words have objective meanings, and you can't just change the meaning of a word. And when presented with the dictionary definition, he just said, well, the dictionary's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't agree with me, therefore it must be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, you can understand how these conversations can be frustrating. And I I can understand perhaps not being so interested in a lot of the theist debate that you might have once been. I mean, I very rarely get involved in religious debates anymore because I don't find that there's anything there left for me to learn. I might have a conversation with a theist about their beliefs, and there can be a lot of interesting content there. But in general, like, I don't really want to go over and over and over the same theistic arguments and the same rebuttals to the theistic arguments and the back and forth. It doesn't go anywhere. So I don't see the point in getting involved in that. But that's going to make me just avoid having those conversations unless I'm in the mood of it, rather than just find the conversations and dismiss them. Because what? That's what atheists have to do. Is that part of your badge of honor? You got to go find, you're part of an army, and you've got to go and dick on theists. Really? I don't know. Oh yes. Knowledge doesn't entail belief. Is the statement that rips me right up. Yeah. Yeah. I've done so many different ways of trying to explain this one, and the people that don't want to know this, they're just ridiculous. Some of them equate knowledge with just plain information, and so go, okay, so if I give you this information, and I gave them something that was clearly wrong, is that knowledge? And they go, no. Okay, well, so it's not just information then. So what is knowledge? And they give another like half-ass sort of thing. You go, okay, and you go down, and you break it down every single time. They can't actually give you a proper description of what knowledge is because they haven't thought about what knowledge actually is. All they've got in their head is the fact that belief and knowledge are separate things on this axis graph that they've been introduced to, and so therefore they can't be the same thing. Hmm.
And I mean, they're not entirely wrong. Knowledge and belief aren't the same thing, but, knowledge is a kind of belief.
Yes, but belief isn't necessarily a kind of knowledge. It's,
No,
one entails
exactly.
the other. Um, in the same way you can say an atheist is a type of non-theist, but a
Yeah.
non-theist isn't necessarily an atheist. Um, So yeah, there's obviously loads of errors in reasoning, and I suppose not all of these have actually been listed as fallacies. One of the ones that I think that we came up to describe our side, I guess, as one of the behaviors was the argument ad meme, wasn't it, Dave?
Yeah.
And that's basically just someone who doesn't really take the time to engage in the conversation. They just drop a meme, and they might meme bomb. They might just do one, wait for you to respond, drop another, but they're not really engaged in the conversation. They're just looking for the win. And this ties back into the gamification thing. They get the likes, they get other people seeing them. Oh my god, it's, great takedown. I actually got ratioed the other day by someone. I was laughing at an atheist who was telling me to prove my God. And it said in the post, another atheist has told me to prove my God. I mean, what's going on? Sort of thing. And they responded instantly, hadn't taken the time to read it. We haven't proven anything, have you? and talking about that sort of thing, and they continued to not read my responses. They kept meme posting. Um, and it was just like really hilarious that actually they weren't making any real sense. And you could see that people weren't following the conversation. They'd just seen the images they post, which they liked, which they then gave the likes and the retweets to, rather than actually engaging in the conversation and actually seeing that, oh my God, this person is just way off the mark. And at the end of the day, it's not something that bothers me, but it's like, surely as the rational skeptics, again, we could be doing better. You'd think, maybe. So yeah, I mean that one obviously isn't even anywhere in the official repertoire of formal or informal, but I think that is just showing, like, I suppose you could argue that the argument ad meme isn't really any sort of error in reasoning, but it's the way it's applied. So again, it's not just responding with a meme. And this is what we were saying about the fallacies earlier on. There's more to it. It's not just that you're arguing with memes, it's the fact that they don't seem really related. They miss the point. You haven't taken the time to understand the conversation. And in responses to them, you've again thrown out another meme that again doesn't really make sense, doesn't really fit in. Um, Yeah. See, I don't believe in evolution. I know it to be a fact. Actual science educator at a atheist skepticon conference, and that's when I unsubbed from them and the atheist experience. Yeah, I mean that. The thing is, I can understand if they phrased it slightly differently. I don't merely believe in evolution. Fine, but it's that slight word difference, because you do believe in an evolution. Because if you have knowledge, if you're accepting evolution as true, you're believing evolution. So, yeah. Ah. And yes, Dave, you're right. Just reading it, you've got the meme of Richard Dawkins, and it's him actually saying that anyone that doesn't believe in evolution is uneducated. You're right, it's great that Dawkins actually got something right for a change.
It is. That usually confuses the fuck out of them. Or I call in Steen and say, Steen, do you believe in evolution? And he'll say, yeah. And they'll say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, well, he's an evolutionary biologist. I think he should know what he's talking about.
Yeah. 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 I know. It's Bible says, I've tried to clarify it to I don't have beliefs, I have knowledge, atheist, and that's the same. I don't have felines, I have cats. It didn't help. No, it probably wouldn't, but that's a pretty good way of putting it. I think, again, coming back to the whole fallacies thing, this can be another way of approaching problems in someone's reasoning, though, rather than just name a fallacy or dismiss them some way or tell them that they're wrong or tell them that they're stupid or whatever. You can actually spend some time just finding different ways to explain the same thing to them. And some people are receptive to that. I've noticed online, like, people are less receptive, but there have been a few people that we've made friends with over the years that have actually appreciated the fact that we've spent the time talking about it in a few different ways, and they've at least got to a point where they understood what we were actually saying, and sometimes change their mind. But the important thing is, I mean, these conversations can be incredibly difficult to have. They can be. And especially online, especially when they're in text, especially when you've got a word limit and all of that, they can be very, very, very difficult. And at the end of the day, being able to reach someone and both of you understand what the other person is saying is the first hurdle that generally never gets crossed. And that's kind of disappointing, really, because most of the time people are actually having these arguments because they're talking past each other and dismissing each other and not taking the time to actually understand each other. And don't get me wrong, it can happen. You can have a bad day and you can be pissed off and you can just dismiss people. But the point is, you should be trying to have these good conversations, and the effort largely doesn't seem to be there. But yeah. Yes, Kimo, belief is a necessary but not sufficient condition for knowledge. That's why it's much less taxing to skip over the belief question and just claim knowledge. Yeah. Yeah.
I wish it was kind of that simple, though, because a lot of them genuinely believe that belief has nothing to do with knowledge. Like, not any part of it. Belief is when you take something to be true without any evidence whatsoever, and if you have knowledge, you have evidence, so therefore you don't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that it's sort of entering the vernacular that way. But though this is one of the things as well. I've seen someone use the Google definition of a belief, and it is like accepting something as true, especially without evidence. So it's not necessarily how it would be used in epistemology, but it has that part there at the front. But then it has the especially without evidence, and they take that end bit, especially without evidence, to say it means accepting something without evidence. And they've missed
Yeah,
the middle bit.
they sort of mistranslate, especially for exclusively.
Yeah, probably a few fallacies in there too, isn't there?
Yeah, fallacy of not being able to read correctly.
Most definitely. So, are there any other fallacies that you think that are quite common that we should bring up tonight to just discuss? Because I mean, we've done sort of an overall conversation about the problems within the community and how they get misused. But are there any fallacies that you'd like to just bring up yourself?
And there's a fallacy that I wish more skeptics and atheists would actually learn about. Um, and it's a kind of obscure one, and not many people know about this fallacy, but it's called the G.I. Joe fallacy. I bring it up quite a lot because not a lot of people know about it. But basically, it's the fallacy where you believe that you are now an expert in reasoning because you know the names of fallacies, so therefore you don't commit fallacies. Based on the G.I. Joe thing, the more you know, I know fallacies, therefore I know how to avoid them in reasoning. But knowing the names isn't the same as knowing how to avoid them. I've got something to bring up about that in a moment, but
No, I mean, if you're ready to bring that up now, then good time to segue into it.
um, okay. When talking about fallacies, I think one of the things that a lot of atheists and skeptics need to understand is that you need to know about how arguments work in order to be able to have a reasonable understanding of fallacies and how they work. You need to know how arguments work, not just arguing, but arguments. You have to know how to construct an argument. You have to know. Oh my god, my mind's gone blank now. Um, when you have to know how they follow, how the reasoning follows. I can't remember the word for it now. Um, Sorry, I'm very tired. I haven't had a lot of sleep this week.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you have to know how, like, all cats are felines. Spot is a cat, therefore Spot is a feline. You have to know how that passes on and how the reason follows. Um,
The structure of it, and
yeah. Shit, hang on. I'm gonna have to look the word up. I'm sorry.
that's all right. I'll just take this moment to say hello to the few people that have jumped into the chat to join the rest of us. So, hello to Juliana, Ben, and Craig Reed. Hope you're doing well tonight. Um, the I always use the wrong fallacy. Uh, yes, Craig. Um, that yeah, we did actually bring that up earlier. There are people who just either get the fallacy wrong or they list the wrong fallacy or anything. It is definitely the case. And Bible says, yeah, the fallacy is often misused. I mean, we were sort of discussing without naming the fallacy, examples of people doing the fallacy. Um, and that is basically people assuming that the argument is false because of there being, a fallacy within it, and actually it's just that the argument is fallacious. The conclusion isn't necessarily untrue. But yes, and Icarus, you're right. All fallacies are often misused. I think that's the problem, and that's what we've been trying to discuss here tonight. Maybe better a few of the fallacies that are misused, how they're misused, and ways that we could have better conversations rather than just shouting out the fallacy. Um, oh, Twisted has said inference. You talk about the logical inference.
That's the
Yes,
the inference,
yes.
yeah.
See,
How
see, mine
the
was
inference
blank.
follows from the premises, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Twisted. Because I was sat here
I so
going,
twisted.
my brain is dead as well.
Yeah, mine's dead. I've had loads of assignments to write recently and not got a lot of sleep, and my brain's just fried. Yeah, you have to understand how inferences follow from premise to premise in order to be able to spot why the reasoning might be bad and why the argument might be fallacious. And I think a lot of atheists and skeptics don't actually understand how inferences work. Um, like I've seen some terrible arguments, like the where not only do the inferences not follow, the premises don't quite follow. All gods are imaginary. Jesus was a god, therefore Jesus was imaginary. Even that would be too good of an argument for what a lot of them make. They just the premises aren't connected. So if you're going to point out fallacies, you have to understand the structure of arguments slightly better. And I don't think enough. Um, they've learned to pick out things, pick out keywords, and if those keywords are there, therefore that fallacy must be applied here. It's more that. And I don't think enough atheists actually, or skeptics today actually go out and learn logic and actually figure out how all this stuff works. And I wish they would stop using these fallacies until that. Start to learn how to actually, like you said earlier, learn how to describe the fault in the argument. Because once you can do that, you're on your way to actually learning how inferences work.
Mm, yeah, most definitely. And as we said, it's not really effective to just name the fallacies anyway. Right?
Yeah, because if they don't know them, then they learn nothing from what you've said.
And if you're getting it wrong and you explain it to them, they're going to get it wrong too in the
Yeah,
future.
they've not learned anything. And I think that's another problem that happens in the community is that a lot of people exist in these echo chambers and they reinforce these bad meanings of fallacies and these bad descriptions.
Yeah.
And they're patted on the back and told they're right. And then they go out into the real world and they come across somebody like us who says that's not what it means. And it's like, well, I have these 800 people in this other group telling me I do know what it means. And just because you've studied it doesn't mean you know it. I've got a group who I study it with, and they told me I'm right. That kind of thing.
And that's a fallacy known as ad
Yeah,
populum.
I thought yeah,
But yes. Couple of fallacies have been brought up in the chat room. So Craig mentions the no true Scotsman fallacy is pretty constantly misused to stop people from making distinctions. It is. It's misused, and basically the no true Scotsman is basically someone does something. So say if you're an atheist, this is the one that we have. So you're an atheist. If you say that atheism can be described as a belief gods don't exist, clearly no atheist would actually say that. So you're not an atheist, therefore you must be a theist. You're not a true atheist, and that is obviously erroneous. For all the reasons that you've probably heard us go on about on our streams before. So I'll skip over those. But yeah, I think it can just be misused all over the place. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that one, Dave?
No, no, that was good.
Um, and Srida brings up black swan fallacy. What? But I'm still waiting to hear your argument. Now, that's an interesting one because, I mean, the black swan fallacy isn't actually really a fallacy in itself. It's basically you're making an argument from induction, and the error there is if you say it's definitely true based on inductive reasoning alone. Uh,
Yeah, it's basically you're jumping from a sort of general premise to a singular premise,
yeah.
and that's fallacious in itself. You can't go from a generality to a specific, and that's basically what the black swan fallacy is. You've gone from a generality to a specific.
Um, oh, here comes a possible etymological fallacy. The origin is from the Latin word for deceptive, not necessarily false. Um, which is interesting. But I suppose if you go back far enough, it could mean anything. I don't think people are necessarily intentionally being deceptive with it. But yes, uh, yeah, do your own research. The rallying cry of the ignorant. Yeah, don't get me wrong though. There are times when people who you have given plenty of research to do, and they keep just asking you, and you go, "I've just given you 3 articles on your request that back this up. If you're not going to read them, then I'm just going to leave it with you to go and do your own research." But there are some that just jump straight to that as well. Again, context matters. Um, so, were there any others that you wanted to discuss as well, Dave?
I wish more. I saw somebody earlier. I think it might have been Jordan. He said his favorite fallacy is the fallacy,
Hmm.
and I wish more atheists and skeptics kind of understood that fallacy. And it's basically you're bringing up a fallacy and dismissing the argument, and you've made a fallacy, therefore your argument's wrong, and that is a fallacy in and of itself. So it's the fallacy. And as we were mentioning earlier, a lot of them do use it as this kind of showstopper and to say, well, you committed this fallacy, therefore your fallacy is wrong. So by calling out these fallacies, they're actually committing a fallacy themselves.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think we've just basically come full circle on that sort of point, haven't we? I mean, as Reason to Doubt says as well, a lot of fallacies can be avoided by talking about probability rather than certitude, and I
Yes.
think that's a good way to do it. And again, that's I think there is this jump that people make from you making a statement of "I believe this" or "this is true," um, to thinking you're absolutely certain and you're unwilling to change your mind in any way, shape, or form. And actually, no, I'm just telling you the way I lean. I'm not saying I have knowledge of this, I'm definitely certain, but you seem to have to add in this extra layer to say that based on da 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 da, I think this is most probable, and sort of go that way. But you will still have some people who are not there for the conversation, still jumping in with the fallacy. Right, were there any more? Were there any other out there that you wanted to present in the chat room for us? Is there any that you wanted us to discuss? Any that you think should come up? I know that we didn't go into detail about all of the fallacies, but we have done a couple of other streams and common fallacies and things like that before. So we wanted to focus more on the behavior and ways to do better. But what about you?
Well, I just want to cover one that Brent asked this afternoon in the group.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
yeah. And while people think, okay, I can discuss this one, Brent earlier this afternoon, because, or he asked about a specific line of reasoning, which is these people were willing to martyr themselves for their belief, therefore their belief must be true because nobody would martyr themselves for a false belief. And um, oh yeah, sorry, I misspoke. Bible. It's the conclusion. The conclusion isn't necessarily wrong, but the actual way the reasoning got there is wrong. Like I said, I'm very tired this evening. Um, yeah, and you can hear a lot of Christians and Muslims who will argue something like this. Well, such and such was martyred, um, and they wouldn't, they wouldn't die for a false belief, so therefore their beliefs must be true. And he asked if there was an actual fallacy for that, and like I said to him this afternoon, I didn't actually know. I've never actually heard one. So I did some research, and there is an actual name for that fallacy,
Oh,
and
really?
it's noble truth fallacy.
The what?
The noble truth fallacy.
Ah, excellent. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard one.
Oh, sorry, noble effort fallacy.
Noble effort fallacy. Yeah, fair. No, I've not heard of that one. I said that it's, it sort of sounds like a form of an ad populum because, lots of people believed it so strongly that this happened. Um, it's also kind of like a common belief type thing. Like everybody believes it, so therefore,
Yeah, it's a slightly different kind
but
of
it has more
reason.
to it. Yeah, yeah. No, I did. I was just looking for trying to think through the ones that I knew of that it could be related to. But it's interesting that there is the noble effort fallacy. There's a new one on
Noble
there.
effort fallacy. And there's another one that's related to it, and it's called the blood of the martyrs fallacy. And it's the idea that you can't talk about, sorry, hang on. You can't question certain ideas because lots of people have died for those ideas. And by questioning those ideas, you're diminishing what they've put in and what they've lost. And so therefore you shouldn't question these ideas. Like free speech shouldn't be questioned because lots of soldiers have died to protect your free speech.
Right. Yeah.
And and that's actually called the blood of the martyrs fallacy, which I
Ah.
thought was interesting.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. Two
I
new
could
ones
only
on me.
find a couple of places supporting that, um, but that seems to be what I could find.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with anything, at the end of the day, they're just labels that provide a shortcut to describing the whole thing anyway. So technically, you can label anything. I mean, like we said, we've made a few up ourselves, and though we've clearly stated we've made them up, they could enter the vernacular, and people start using them, and they become, considered standardized informal fallacies. It could happen. So yeah. Um, I would like to say happy birthday to Luke for tomorrow, but actually, I don't care.
I was gonna say I'd like to say it too, but I hate him. He knows I'm joking.
And he knows I'm Joe Johnston. Uh, do you want a little song? Do you want a song, Luke? I'll send you a sweet lullaby over WhatsApp later. um, that's a really interesting one, though, Dave. I hope I can remember that one in the morning. Um, right now, I'm not completely with it, but yeah, noble truth fallacy and blood of the martyr fallacy. I like them. We should get them on t-shirts. Yeah, actually, you saying there that it sounds like a brutal death metal band. Yeah, it could, and their album could be the Noble Truth. Awesome. Someone meme that up. Get some music on. Awesome. Well, are there any others out there in the chat room right now? So Twisted says, "Is appeal to definition a made up one?" They're all made up at the end of the day.
Yeah, as much as anything else is made up. But they're used to point out to specific or specific kinds of general errors in reasoning, like common errors in reasoning. And appeal to definition is one of them. I think I've heard it also referred to as Argentum Dictionarium or
That's the
something
one.
like that. But yeah,
Um,
appeal to dictionary, appeal to definition. Just because it's in the dictionary or just because some people define it such a way doesn't mean that that's how the word must be defined, because words just don't work like that.
yeah. Again, the common one that all of you will be very much aware of is someone going, look at what the Google Dictionary says about the definition of atheism. Like, okay. Here's all these other dictionaries if you want them, and here's these papers, and here's that, and da, 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 da. No, this one.
Yeah, but those dictionaries were bought out by Christians 200 years ago so that they could affect the language and promote the Christian agenda. I actually had somebody the other night say that they, in academia, they'd never actually heard the word atheism spoken about or referred to as the belief God doesn't exist, not even in their philosophy of religion class. And they were talking about Cosmic Skeptic, and um, it was mentioned that Cosmic Skeptic went to Oxford, and she said, "Oh, well, that's why he learned it, because he's gone to a religious university." And
Again,
it's
with the
only
dismissive
religious,
reasoning.
yeah, it's only religious academic settings where you'll learn about atheism in philosophy of religion. Secular philosophy of religion classes don't discuss atheism, and it's definitely not described as the belief God does not exist in secular philosophy classes.
Interesting. So I wonder why, all those other atheist philosophers that did have the more secular.
Yeah, my university was very much secular. It had atheism as the belief God does not exist. Atheism is an integral part of the philosophy of religion. Any philosophy of religion class you do is going to mention atheism and discuss it in terms of the proposition or the belief God does not exist. It's just part of philosophy of religion.
Kimmo mentions the Mott and Bailey technique. Is I always forget the Mott and Bailey. Is that the bait and switch? It is. Oh wow, I've remembered that one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I can't remember the exact wording for it now, but it's sort of like presenting something and then coming up with like a weaker version to protect it or something like that. But yeah, it is a debate and switch.
and Kimmo's reckoning that it's increased over the last couple of decades, or is just noticing it more. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure because it's not really one I call out or look for or anything like that. I'm not particularly clear on exactly what it is, especially when I'm in this condition. But and it's not really one I know much about, unfortunately.
I will say though, I mean, if something irks you, Kimmo, you will notice it more because it irks you. And the ones that don't bother you as much, you'll be like, they might be coming through thick and fast, but you're just like, nah. And that one comes up. Oh! So, and I suppose it's an increased thing. Every time it annoys you, it probably reminds you of all the previous times you're annoyed as well. And it just, you're getting more and more annoyed with it. Um, Yes, so Reason to Doubt says a person dying for their beliefs can tell us about the person's conviction, but may not have anything to do with the truth. And yeah, definitely agree with you there. Um, so on a more serious note, yes, happy birthday for tomorrow, Luke. And I will sing you a little lullaby later. Um, now we can shout noble truth fallacy the next time we hear that apologetic. Brilliant.
Noble effort fallacy.
Noble effort fallacy. Noble effort fallacy. Uh, good names though, both of those ones.
Yeah.
Ben also
Usually
says
it's
someone.
quite boring, but that one's
Yeah.
yeah.
Ben says someone should make a parody Christian rock band called Noble Truth, or Noble Effort, as it would actually have to be. But Blood of the Martyr would work. just as well. Bible, we're talking about atheism here, not philosophy. Yes, that is something you sort of hear. It is interesting, isn't it? That whilst I accept, not everything's philosophy, there are certain conversations that are very deep in the realms of philosophy. And much in the way that if you're discussing, biological evolution, even if you don't know anything about science at all, you are having a scientific conversation because that is the context of the conversation. So I mean, atheism is one of those things that fits in as part of philosophy. Yes, there are people that don't understand any of the philosophy, but like that's sort of where it kind of belongs. In a All right. Well, I think that there aren't any more coming in the chat room. I think that's where we're at. Were there any more that you had, Dave?
No, no, that's good. We got through a lot of what I wanted to say, and a lot of the ideas that are kind of important. So, and also, I'm kind of wanting to get to bed because I'm shattered.
Yeah, you and me both, mate. I think there's a good stopping point as any. But before we go, do you have anything that you would like to recommend to anyone?
I do, but it's a film and it's Violent Night, and a download of it came out today. And goddamn, if I'm not going to watch the hell out of it tomorrow.
Awesome. Uh, One for the weekend, I think, for me. But yes, most definitely sounds awesome. Awesome. Well, in that case, thank you everybody who has joined us in the chat room and has joined us on the rerun and wherever you're watching or listening to this. And obviously, Dave, thank you very much for another enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, no, it was great. Thank you.
And hopefully we'll see you. Actually, before we go, I forgot to say, on Thursday, we're planning on doing like a free-for-all. So we're just going to open up Discord. We're going to send out a link in the description for Thursday. And anyone who wants to join us for a chat can join on. It's basically a little Christmas party type thing. So if anyone wants to come and join us there on Thursday, feel free. It's not going to be a massively long mental one like some of the previous free for alls have been, but hopefully it'll still be good fun. I know that a couple of people have said that they're coming along already, that have just randomly just mentioned it too, but would love to have anyone there on with us. I know that those conversations can sometimes get really, really busy, really, really messy, but they also can be incredibly, incredibly fun. And we can learn a lot about, and it's a good opportunity for us to learn a bit more about you and things that you like. So not only is it an Ask Us Anything, we open it up to just ask anything really, but you can ask us anything that you want. But yeah, so far Brina is definitely going to be here, and Luke's coming. He hasn't agreed yet, but he's coming. And we'll see whoever else turns up. It's hopefully going to be a good laugh. Anyway, thank you everybody. Have yourselves a good one. Make sure you check out the 2 recent videos on the definitions of atheism throughout history and the issues with agnostic atheism. Have a good night all.